And we're back. I'm Kim, and this is Sophie.
Hey.
And for those who don't know, we founded the CTVC newsletter 7 years ago. And we used to do these Q&As and interviews with leaders in the energy and climate space, the founders, the leaders, the builders. And we're excited to bring it back, this time also in video form, because that's what all the cool kids are doing these days. And we're excited to be putting our mics and recorders back on in what feels like a refreshingly good time in the market. Fervo, climate tech energy darling, just IPO'd a couple days ago off the back of a lot of energy IPOs that are also coming up in the pipeline. We're also seeing some positive signals again in the energy and climate fundraising market, both in terms of big investment rounds getting announced, but also in terms of some climate funds getting some more capital in the market. And all of that is a great moment to really talk about our first guest.
Exactly. That's why we wanted to bring on Mike Schrep to talk about Gigascale's $250 million institutional fund and fundraise. So for those who haven't met Schrep yet, he is well known, rightfully so, as having been the CTO of Facebook, now Meta, for about 15 years. And while people know that, they might not know that he's actually the person that built out a lot of Meta's data centers all around the world and has stories and scars and whatnot to kind of tell from that era. And not only was he building physical AI infrastructure before we were calling it that, but he also built one of the first AI labs back in 2013. So there's very few people who are better positioned, right, to talk about this intersection of compute and energy and climate. Schrep and team have been investing out of Gigascale for the past number of years into dozens of companies and have a pretty awesome portfolio at this point. And so this 250 million institutional fund is bringing in external capital and kind of putting a marker in, we're here to scale, and we've got a real footing in what does it look like to bring hardware assets into the climate space. And they're also much appreciatedly not shying away from the climate label at a time where maybe folks are kind of bending into different directions. It's sometimes tough out there. So of all the things that Schrep could be doing in the world, grateful, and I think it's just frankly awesome that he's working on this. So always a pleasure. And we had fun with this one.
Yeah, Sophie and I totally had fun with this one, and it'll be first of hopefully many more to come. So without any further ado, we're excited for you all to hear from us and from Schrep.
Okay, great. Hey, I'm Mike Schroepfer. Most people call me Schrep. I, popped out of Stanford with a CS degree in the late 90s and built companies for the next 25 years. Started my venture-backed startup in 2000, built Firefox for a while, and then joined Facebook in 2008. Sort of built most of the hardware, software, infrastructure, onboarded Oculus and Instagram, built our AI research lab, did a lot of different things, and decided a little bit ago to take on my next adventure, which was, I thought the world was waking up to the important problem being atoms, not bits, and that was the future we were going to build, and that there was a confluence of demand and technological innovation that meant we got a shot to rebuild our infrastructure in a way that our kids and our kids' kids are going to be real happy about, and do so without costing anyone any money. In fact, saving folks a lot of money along the way. So that's what we're doing.
Love it. And I think one of the things I remember you calling out in your story on LinkedIn was that you all were thinking about this atoms not bits thesis for quite some time, and now it feels like it's playing out in the real world. Everyone's talking about physical economy, power demand, but back then it might have felt pretty non-obvious. What really made you take that bet in the first place? Especially, coming from Meta, everyone thinks software is eating the world. What made you think atoms and hardware would matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, so at Meta, we started the Facebook AI Research Lab in 2013, and this was many years before ChatGPT. And it's a sort of a similar process in sort of looking at the fundamentals. Where are the fundamental technologies, where are the economics going? And even, 5-6 years ago, it was obvious that, solar was getting really cheap, batteries were getting really cheap, electricity demand was growing, even pre-data centers. If you just talk about onshoring EVs, people replacing gas stoves with induction stoves, replacing, gas heaters with heat pumps, just that X data centers was going to create an unprecedented demand on the grid in the US. And it's like one of these, when you're at the bottom of the S curve, it looks like nothing's changing. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, everything's changing all the time. And so the trick in all of these things is to catch it a couple of years in the flat part of the S curve and to be kind of laying the groundwork so you're ready to go. But I think the fundamentals were there, plain to see for everyone.
And you talked a little
I'd
about
love,
data center. Oh, go ahead.
I think we're going to say the same thing. So you
Yeah.
go, and then I'll drive it home.
Well, I was gonna harp on the data centers point, because X data centers, I agree, you did see the demand curve going up and to the right, but obviously, at least I didn't fully expect the explosion that's happened over the last 3 years. While you were at Meta, was there hints of that data center explosion, AI explosion coming? Did you see that, demand growth story taking off as much as it has, or has that been a surprise to you as well?
I mean, I would say the scale of it is I think surprised a lot of people. So I knew it would grow. I wouldn't say that I called it perfectly that it would grow at the pace that it's growing right now. But
Yeah.
we made an investment in Panthalassa, which is an open ocean data center that's suitable for inference, not for training. Made that many years ago. And that bet was premised on, I think inference capacity is going to be where it's at. And this is the cheapest way to build inference compute at the terawatt scale. And so, follow the money, not my words. I think that we bet on a couple of these things years in advance. Because again, I think you could see the writing on the wall on that one. Everyone was chasing training when it first came along, and then said like, wait a second, these models got to run somewhere. And that's where sort of the real infrastructure is going to come out. So I would say like directionally correct, had the magnitude off by a little bit.
Talking about you putting your time and effort where your thoughts are. I think not everybody knows that you were super involved in actually building these data centers in your seat at Meta. Any narratives or stories? I seem to recall a particular anecdote about a loading dock being a specific height. Tell us about your time actually building real things and kind of how that's porting over into the types of founders that you're excited to work with building real things in this space today.
Yeah, it builds a real humility when you have to work in the real world, because everyone wants to think it's like this really clever, difficult, gnarly intellectual problem. But it's like the real world is a thousand annoying small things. So, I showed up at Meta in 2008. We're mostly a software company. Our first data center turned online in Prineville, Oregon in 2011. And this is a building that we bought the land, we designed the building, we designed the largest fleet of servers in the building, which is the Type 1, the Freedom server. This is actually the motherboard that we designed, for that
Wow.
server. And we had all this with next generation cooling technology that was free air cooling, so no chillers in the building. And I showed up for an inspection before the building was done, and there's like these just like wooden blocks on the loading dock. It's like, what's up with that? And they're like, oh, we graded the loading dock at the wrong angle, so the truck back is here to try to unload. It's just like the thing you see in every freaking Walmart in the world, we didn't get right in our brand new state-of-the-art data center, 14 years ago. So that is just like, imagine that, but like 1,000 a day, of just like concrete didn't work, the chiller broke, the electrician didn't show up, local opposition to something. It's like just like a never ending. So it builds a lot of humility for me of just just get to the problems and grind through them. And then sort of the grind and being willing to be in the details and not be afraid to find, clever solutions. It was just announced, for example, that, Meta is building data centers and tents. Think about your wedding tent venue. It's like you can put up a wedding tent in an afternoon or a couple days. Building a building takes a year or two. It's like, well, when time to compute really matters, it's like, why am I spending all this time erecting steel when mostly I got to stop the rain from hitting the servers, which a tent can do just fine. So, clever solutions to hard problems, but a lot of just grinded out sort of details. The last thing I'd say is, and this really informs the investments we look at, is the thing that really motivated from this is we deliver data centers consistently. So I built, I don't know, 17 places around the world, all over the world, including Singapore, Europe, United States, tens of millions of square feet. We delivered mostly on time, on budget, like couple percent on time, on budget. And you hear about all California high-speed rail and this and that. And the reason we did it is we just the way to deliver stuff cheaper is to do the same thing over and over again. Everything in your life that has gone down in price is mass produced. Everything that isn't is like a bespoke healthcare, custom homes. These are all bespoke projects. And so the more we can build new infrastructure technology as mass production things in factories, the easier it gets. And I can talk about specific examples of that later and how that maps our portfolio, but it's really informed my view because that's what we built is mass production.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you've seen really bring costs down in things like solar and wind.
Yep.
And I think that also brings
Batteries.
an interest and batteries, exactly. That brings an interesting question though, which is something we think about, right? The role of innovation versus the role of deployment and when that really tips into deployment. I think one of the challenges we've seen in the last 7 years of climate tech is you have a ton of early stage venture capital pouring into all this new innovation. We have like, I don't know, 40 different SMR companies, but then you don't get to tip into deployment, or not everyone gets to tip into deployment, and you don't have repetition. So with that thesis, like, how do you see early stage venture playing a role when it is financing all this different type of innovation, when it's really repeatability that gets this stuff to scale and makes it affordable?
Yeah, I think that's where the architecture of the system really, really matters. So,
Mhm.
like in SMRs, for example, we made a bet. It's radiant nuclear and it's a microreactor. It's truck and air, you can put it on a C-17. So people talk about factory build and all the rest of it. It's like literally like put the entire reactor core on a truck. So, and our thesis was building new technologies is really hard. Building new fission reactors is really hard. Building an existing fission reactor takes about a decade. You know, if you just look at building an AP 1000 or AP 1400. So like the only way to go faster is to go smaller. And because they're so small and they can repeat and actually literally build everything, we think they'll be one of the fastest to deploy out there.
Mm.
And they're gonna like their plan is to be, they're talking about deploying like dozens of units in the first year.
Mm.
So you know, that's still not at the scale I'd like to see, but it's like way better than one, which is where a lot of these projects get to. And then you got to get to two. Like, so that it sort of informs, you know, how we think about it. Even in the power, like on the grid, this is one of my favorites. It's like, I'm sure you both know this up and down, but it's just astounding to me. Anytime I try to order a power transformer, it's like its own special snowflake project. You do all the custom engineering for it. What size is it? What voltages? This, that, and the other thing. They get mechanical engineers involved. They send things out. You get one shipped in. It's like, you know, shipped over. And this takes like 18 months, right? You're like, why in the world are we doing this? And part of it is because it's 100-year-old technology and you literally encode a bunch of the system in the hardware. Like what voltages on each end are we talking about? Gets burned into the structure of the transformer. And like you got a company like Karen Power says, wait a second, we've been shipping power electronics and electric vehicles at the 10 million unit scale for a long time. Those new modern power electronics are software programmable. I can
Mm.
drop a 5 megawatt unit on a pad. You can tell me anywhere from 400 volts DC to 35,000 volts AC. Pick it. I don't care. Change it, you know, on your laptop. You're done. And
Yeah.
then what I do is I sell the same product to a solar farm, to a car charging farm, to a data center. And I like just make a lot, literally the same thing over and over again.
Over and over
So
again.
that's the like, I think that's the future we're building. And I think it's going to be awesome.
I have two directions I can go in. I was going to go into China or capital stack. I'm going to choose to go capital stack, but we may or may not come back to China. So on the capital stack front, you mentioned, first project, second of a project. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years on first of a kind, second of a kind. For a second there, it felt like there might be the catalytic capital, there might be the government capital to really finance these things and get them to deployment. But I think we've seen over the last 2 years, it's been really, really, really challenging. So I think the point on repeatability makes sense. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you still need lots of
Need money.
capital to
Yeah.
manufacture this stuff.
Yeah.
And we've learned that venture capital isn't always the best
Yeah.
asset class for this. So how are you thinking about that capital stack gap that still exists for the portfolio?
Yeah, so I had good news and bad news. I'm sure there are tons of entrepreneurs watching this who are struggling to raise capital. And I like, as a former founder, getting lots of no's in my Series A. There's a whole Twitter thread about bad VCs right now. And like, yep, I had someone fall asleep during my pitch. I remember exactly where it was, who it was, when it was. That was 26 years ago. So like, I feel you. It sucks. It sucks to raise money and get no. So like that's the bad news. The good news is I'm not trying to systemically solve this problem. I'm not trying to get every company funded or everything funded. We're trying to pick outliers. We're trying to pick the company that's going to run the gauntlet and get out there when no one else could. And so when you talk about how do you raise money, well, Commonwealth Fusion Systems is building fusion. It's the most high risk technical path, but the most promising to deliver clean power to the grid. They've raised billions of dollars, right? And that is because they have just an unbelievable team taking the most, scientifically proven approach. We've seen companies like Dioxycle, which is turning, carbon emissions into clean chemicals. Nobody likes to talk about chemicals. It's super boring. Nobody likes to talk about reusing carbon anymore. It's super boring. Sarah is an unbelievable CEO who keeps getting non-dilutive financing from governments and others, and like has signed off takes with L'Oreal and others. So like I think of this less as like what's the systematic problem, and like for this particular company and this founder, do they have the right to make it all the way? Because their product is just that good and the team is just that good. And then let's like go to work and get them out there. So like that is a little bit more, and that's a little more fun. It's a little more bespoke. It doesn't solve the problem for all of our viewers, but it like that's the way we approach it in our portfolio, both in terms of how we evaluate, and then once you're in our portfolio, how we show up to basically just get behind and push.
Yeah. I think you touched on this a little bit, and I hear you also talking a lot about green discount as the kind of solution to green premium, or the antidote to green premium. Tell us a bit more about your thesis, your team's thesis, when you look at these bets. Repeatability being one, green
Yeah.
discount sounds interesting, but like, what specifically are you looking for in these outliers that you think that make them outliers?
I just think there's so many problems in the world that when you like break them down and look at them and then apply like literally 2026 technology to it, you say, huh, there's a way to do this that is 5x better or cheaper and
Yeah.
faster or whatever it may be. And we haven't done it yet, but if it works, that's the remit we're burning down. Let me give you one very specific example. I mentioned like offshore inference data centers. There's a lot of talk about space-based data centers going on right now. Super cool. I love space. It's 100 times cheaper to put a ton of material in a floating platform in the ocean than it is to launch it into space. So if anyone thinks space-based data centers are a great idea, I have a different technology that starts with a 100x cost advantage. So even if I'm wrong by 10x and then we're wrong by another 2x, I still have a 5x advantage. And so that's the way we sort of think about it. And if you like really break it down to like, what is this thing made of and how do I construct it and what are analogs in offshore oil platforms, there's like a lot of data on like, you can like weigh the steel, and we make the steel the same way we make the pylon for an oil platform. So I can literally buy factory equipment from Italy to make exactly this. I don't have to make any special fixtures. Like and it's a really simple machine. Like it just works. And so this is the fun thing about atoms versus bits for me, is like you can write a lot of things down on a spreadsheet and say like, what's the lowest possible cost this thing could be, and what's the best current alternative? And if it's like 20% cheaper, then we're in trouble. But if it's like 5 or 10x cheaper, then like, we got like some room to maneuver here. And I can give you like 30 other examples of that. And there's a lot of exciting things. I'll just give you one other because I think it's very different than all of these.
Yeah.
So, Salcoa is making neodymium in Alameda, California. I can take you over there. I can give you a 6.5 kilogram, chunk of neodymium ready to be put in a magnet, ready to be put in an electric motor. For those of you who don't know what this is that the key component to making electric motors, which we need for everything, wind turbines, the EVs, you name it. All of it's made in China right now. If you see how it's made in China, it's a terribly polluting, deadly process. Fluorinated
Mhm.
gases. They literally have factories with like open roofs because it's so dangerous. It's not a thing you want in your backyard. If you want to do that process in the United States, you have to double wall the containers. You have to do all the safety stuff, which makes it insanely expensive, right? Socoa has a totally different process for taking mine scraps and taking recycling goods and turning it in this really like you just like walk around the factory. I mean, I guess you need the like slippers and the glasses, but like that's it. And it's totally safe. And because of that, it's such a dead simple process, and they output like, magnet grade neodymium. Their pitch is like, hey, we can make it and it's cost competitive with China and it doesn't emit anything. So like that's that like co-alignment because it's so simple. Like you think about it, it's like my thing's simpler. I think it's going to be cheaper. And like because it's simpler, we have less stuff happening that we have to fix and emit. And like that's another example of that. No, there's not,
Hmm.
they're hard to find, but once you find them, they're kind of magic.
Love
I'm
it.
trying to think of how to thread the needle on this one because it's that it's kind of asking the question that everyone's been asking
Yeah.
me and asking the space back, which
Just
is
say it,
like,
Sophie. I've known you for so long. Come on. These are
well, it's
softballs. Give
like,
me the
should we be still calling this climate? It's kind of the lamest question and the biggest question, right? Like, I'm still calling it climate. I think you're still calling it climate. We're also threading in all of these new words, right?
yeah.
Physical economy, physical
Yeah.
AI, whatever, whatever. Is climate still your theme or thesis, or like how are we tightening or
Yeah.
refining that up?
Yeah. I mean, I think climate tech has always been an awkward framing. So when you're talking about
Yeah.
like alt proteins and fusion and like neodymium production and an offshore data center, and you're like, that's climate tech. You're like, wait, what? So like,
Hmm.
I think it's like a weird framing. I don't have a decidedly better one. The
Yeah.
way I try to describe it is like, look, first thing you need to know, we're a for-profit business. I do plenty of philanthropy. This is a place where I've taken other people's money on the promise I would give them back times, a lot. And so we're in business. Businesses, like I didn't go to business school, so my one-on-one in business is we need to make stuff for cheaper than we sell it for, and there has to be lots of demand. And so like that's the fundamentals of every business we're going after. Is like it's a good business where the buyer gives two craps about the environment. Like they buy it because it makes their life better, in some way, and that's like the basics. We just add this extra little filter on here. It's like okay, and then if this thing wins, what's the good thing that happens to pollution, to resilience, to CHGs, to all the rest of it? And if the answer is nothing or something bad, then we go, okay, that one's not for us. Plenty of other great businesses out there for us. And so that's the way we execute it day to day. What to
Mm.
call that? I call it deep tech with a climate lens. You can call it climate tech with a deep, I don't
Hmm.
have the soundbite for you yet, Sophie. I'm sure you guys are both way better at this than me, so you can reframe this in some way, but that's just the way I like to think about it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And I think that attracts high caliber people to the conversation, right? Like, of course, it's one of nuance, but I also genuinely appreciate that you're not running away from it at a time where I think a lot of folks are maybe tacking and weaving and bending a little bit too much to, I don't know, it's tough out there. So we've got lots of different types of customers, running an investing fund, and
Yeah.
it's good to have a strong perspective and backbone through all of that. So interesting of like, yeah, you obviously go like strong business first, and then maybe you filter off the ones that are strong business but doesn't align with interest areas. I think another way that you guys do it is you're all quite expert across you, Victoria, Evelyn, and the rest of the team in lots of different areas, which I think are not all the same. And so you naturally
Yeah.
cover a large surface area of these different verticals or sectors. So lots of ways of talking about it. One other piece, and it's so fun to kind of do the almost go back to the retro questions here of like when we started writing CTVC and we were starting to chat together, so much of the conversation was around climate mitigation. And it was kind of climate mitigation, climate adaptation, resiliency, kind of coming in, regeneration, all of those words. How much do you still think about that phrasing? How much do you think that maybe adaptation hasn't quite hit home? And how much does that play into maybe investing work that you're doing out of Gigascale, or perhaps that falls into a different bucket entirely because it's quite challenging, right, to drive from a returns perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think we think about those terms, and again, I feel like you have to distill it down into a sentence or two about like what happens here. It's like, all right, we're gonna like replace a polluting gas power plant with a zero emission power source. Cool, great, that sounds great, right?
Mhm.
Or we're gonna help people better understand wildfire risk, so they can respond and prevent. Or we just did a grid resilience company that is basically putting sensors on the grid to try to get fault detection to detect when a grid fault causes a wildfire. So it's like, cool, if I can catch a wildfire early, I can put it out before it becomes devastating fire. Like that turns out to emit a bunch of GHCs when you burn wood. It also turns to be really bad for all the people in the area. So is that mitigation adaptation? I don't know. Pretty sure that's a really great thing. So like we use those words, but I don't think we have like columns in an investing memo. It's kind of like
Sure.
I like to keep things simple. It's like, why is this business going to be huge and make a lot of money? And then like, what's the good we're going to see in the world as a result
Yep.
of it from a human health, from a resilience, from GHCs and others. There's a much broader conversation about like what's happening in the climate ecosystem. I think one of the challenges I've had is like people have a little bit of a zero sum mentality to these things, which is like if you're doing
Mhm.
X, you're not doing Y. And I just like it's just like countered my view, which is just like there's so much
Mhm.
stuff we need to do. We need to
Yep.
protect people from wildfires. We need to reduce pollution. We need to reduce GHCs. We need to deal with sea level rise. Like just like pick one and go for it. Like
Yep.
this, like having to sort them by priority. I think I understand it in a world where funds are short, but like my premise is if you build things that people want, you can get an economic engine and you can solve the money short problem. And then we don't have to
Totally.
make these choices.
Totally. Well heard. Okay, my last like look back, look forward framing of question, but from the time when you were thinking on, I believe, high day of whatever year of spending more time working on your work outside of Meta than in Meta, comparing that kind of time period to the time period now. If you had to kind of thumbs up, thumbs down on some scale of caliber of founder talent that was like jumping up and down, raising their hand of, I want to work on climate, then versus now, can you compare, contrast?
It's like gone in cycles, to be really honest. So there
Yeah.
was a period of time in 2020, 2021, that's all people wanted to talk about, and we were sort of deluged with people wanting to work on it. And then sort of AI took off, and climate seemed a little harder than everyone thought it was going to be, and we weren't going to solve it in 5 years. And so like a lot of people went away, and then kind of they say, hey, thanks for doing that, but like I'm not going to help you. So but I think we're seeing in the last like even 18 months like an even better version of it in two regards. One is I think people are coming at it much more with this economic lens now, which I think is really healthy. Meaning that they're like the economics come first as this good business comes first, because you can't just like depend on the IRA or something else to like fund your business. And two is like, Tesla, SpaceX, they were a never-ending font of just like Neuralink, amazing people coming out of those companies who've been trained on how to build new stuff. We're like, cool, I want to build new stuff in this area. And so I like this is why again I'm kind of like the make the pie bigger. Like my problem is just like I do not have enough hours in the day to meet all the cool stuff I'm seeing. And like it is not a like, geez, no one's pitching me. It's like, man, if you're not getting a response from me on email or Slack or text or something, it's just because like I'm overwhelmed and everything is freaking awesome. And so I'm just trying to figure out which more awesome thing to go spend time with. It is not the other problem where like, man, there's no one good in this space. So it's a fun time. I mean, the other thing you realize is like we're not talking about this in CTVC is um AI has made this the best time in the world to start a new company. If you just think about the leverage you can get from two people
Yeah.
building a company now versus like 7 freaking months ago, not like
Yeah.
4 years ago, but like November. So like it's just we have CEOs vibe coding, firmware code for their hardware company. So like is freaking unbelievable right now. And I'll tell you, like, it wasn't always good, Sophie. Like, because we're friends, I could say that, look, stepping away from a big platform, a CTO of a, very, very, very large, it's kind of like, where do you go? Like, what do you
Yeah.
do? And like, it wasn't always easy and fun for me. There was a period of time where I was like, geez, did I make a big mistake? What am I
Yeah.
doing here?
Mhm.
I had to work. I had to show up and introduce myself to LPs and be like, hi, my name is Mike Schroepfer. This is what I did. And
Yeah.
like that starts to grate your ego a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, that's part of what I wanted is I wanted to prove I could do it. I also just thought the opportunity was here. And like we're seeing all the tailwinds now. It's much easier now because a bunch of our companies are working. You don't have to believe me anymore. You're just like, all right, go meet one of our founders and they'll tell you about how their business is blowing up in a good way. Like, and so that makes it a lot easier. So you don't have to just believe me that it
Yep.
will happen. So
Yep.
so now it's easier for me to say because everything's kind of
Mhm.
going really well. But I do want to go back that like it has been hard, which means it will be hard again.
Yeah.
Like I'm not assuming it's like this all the time. But we gotta like buckle in and keep going. That's why I think it's more important than ever to say like even if the vibe shift has happened in the conversation, the
Yeah.
reality is still here. Like the reality of what's going on in the world's here and the
Yeah.
economics are here. Like that's what we're gonna live with in 5 years, not what like the current vibes are and which words to use to call something.
I love it. That
Here,
was a
here.
great way to wrap. We have just maybe two quick fire questions, if you don't mind, to wrap that we like to ask all of our guests. And then I think we can leave it there. What's the one thing that you think people are missing out on? You mentioned a lot in the last question, but what's the one thing you think people are missing out on in this space? Or get
I
wrong?
would say the most common mistake I see brilliant people make, particularly technologists, is to not take a systems view on what they're doing. So,
Mm.
like, we'll get pitched all the time with, like, I have a new thing that's 5 times better than prior thing, and it's this widget. And you're like, cool, cool. Who uses that and what? And how much of that is it? And when you sort of zoom out a little bit, you're like, you made 1% of something 5x better. That is sort of irrelevant because the actual buyer cares about this big thing, and you made this one part I made one bolt in my, 30,000 part car, 5 times cheaper. Nobody cares.
Mm.
And that's really hard for someone who spent their whole, 5 years at a PhD working on that thing. So the one thing I'd ask everyone to do is like always zoom out and take a system view. Like at the end of the day, someone is paying money for this thing. What does that person care about? And does your thing solve their, like the post-it note on their desk, their top one or two problem? If it doesn't, like it's going to be a lot harder. So that's the thing I wish most technologists would do. And it's hard for me because they're so brilliant. The thing that I get, I'm a nerd. So it's like, that's so cool. But it's like, it's like, oh, but like you need someone to buy it. So, so that's the number one wish I'd ask people do their homework before they show up and talk to me.
100%. Systems level. Last
systems level. Climate change is a systems level, right? So
it really is. Last question for you. What would you buy, sell, or hold? It can be climate, it can be energy, it can be anything. What would you buy, sell, or hold right now?
I would buy compute supply, memory, power assets, land with good solar irradiance. Anyone who can build sort of grid capacity. What would I sell or hold? I don't know. I'm more of a buyer than a seller, so I don't do the negative side of things. I only think about where the opportunities are. So that's a crap answer, but it's just like where my brain goes. There's only like where's the alpha, not where's the where I'm not a short seller. So sorry.
I love it. That's why you got into venture capital. That's why you raised this fund.
100x or bust.
Exactly. Cool. Well, as the people said that maybe walked away, thanks for doing the work. Thanks for continuing to do the work. Congrats on the institutional vehicle. I think it's magnificent and impressive and very cool to go around the world and restart in some ways and keep on bringing the systems and scale perspective to this problem set, which we certainly haven't solved yet, and we can call it whatever we want, but glad to be working on all of these things together. So congrats to you and Evelyn and Victoria, et cetera, et cetera.
It's an exciting time for us, but I would be remiss to say there's like a big village of people. Like, I don't want to take too much credit for this personally. Like, you two have done a tremendous amount consistently. Sophie, you and I have worked on this for 5+ years together in a variety of different ways and continue to work together. You've got OG firms out there like Congruent, like Capricorn, like Andrew Beebe over at Obvious Ventures. There's like a set of people out there who've been investing for quite a while. NGP and Phil Deutsch, like they've been riding this train before it was cool. So I'm deeply thankful for them. These are all folks we collaborate with a lot. So I don't want to pretend like I'm the sole actor here. I'm excited. A lot's happening. Obviously, our founders are the real star, but and excited to continue to work with you too.
Yeah, perfectly said. Amazing. All right. We were maybe 3 years overdue, but we made it happen and had something big to celebrate. So.
Worth the wait. Worth the wait.
Love it. Thanks for taking the time. This was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really appreciating the perspective. Good to see you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.